All right, we're continuing our series, Fear versus Faith. Our theme verse has been from Lamentations 3:23, where Jeremiah writes of God, "Great is your faithfulness." And today we're looking at the idea that fear creates doubt, but faith emboldens. Go ahead and be turning to Judges chapter 2. We're going to read a little bit there before we get into chapter 6.
By the way, I found you.
You did. So did I.
Judges what now?
Judges chapter 2.
Oh, okay.
Things on the wrong side. All right. So a little bit of history about the 14th century BC. Moses led Israel to the border of Canaan, and then Joshua led Israel into Canaan. God gave them victory over their enemies. And in Judges chapter 2, verse 7 reads, "And the people served the Lord all the days of Joshua and all the days of the elders who survived Joshua, who had seen all the great work of the Lord, which he had done for Israel." Great. But then, unfortunately, starting in verse 10, we see that when all that generation was gathered to their fathers, there arose another generation after them who did not know the Lord, nor yet the work which he had done for Israel. One generation removed, and they forget about God. They're apparently not taught, just don't remember, whatever. But there was Joshua's generation was an older generation, but then the generation of those who went into the land, when they died, according to verse 10, then that next generation didn't know God. Yes.
I believe it was you yesterday, Anita, that said something about, or it could have been mine, about that, our generation, but then by the time we're grandparents, that was it Bonnie was talking about that things were changed and forgot, or you were forgotten or whatever. But even because we were talking about pictures, but you would actually, your life was forgotten in things.
Yeah.
So this is
those grandchildren that never saw him.
right. So this is
Right.
an example.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Absolutely, because this is nothing new, that we're a generation removed from our own families, just not knowing God at all. And that's what's happening here. And there's a consequence to this. Verse 11, Israel started worshiping. They did evil in the sight of the Lord and served the Baals. They started worshiping like everyone around them, just like their neighbors. That's nothing that we don't see today, right? You just
because the parents don't teach the
younger. Right. I never mind when a preacher gets up there and teaches fundamentals. And I've heard David, apologize. I know we know it's kind of like, no, the next generation doesn't know this. The next generation has to hear this.
There's a lot of young people in the church that really don't know.
Yeah. Or why we do things. And if you don't know why we do certain things, then when someone says, hey, why are you doing it this way? Why don't you come over here and do it this, worship this way? Why not? I don't know why we're doing it this way.
Yeah, a lot of our generation that fell short too. Yeah, my age.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Their children.
So anyway, we get to verse 14. So, Israel does evil in the sight of the Lord. Basically, they worship just like everybody around them is worshiping. They worship the idols. And in verse 14, it makes God angry. The anger of the Lord burned against Israel, and he gave them into the hands of plunderers who plundered them. He sold them into the hands of their enemies around them so that they could no longer stand before their enemies. God is angry. God punishes sin. And God allows these same, now remember, God is the one who had given them success, who had given them victory over their enemies, and God withdraws that protection. And then verse 16 says that then the Lord, the people would be severely distressed. They would be, run over by their enemies. Israel, where it was situated, if you see the history of it, and this is through the Greek Empire, the Roman Empire, they're just in the way. And people just kind of like, if one of the Greek kings, he had a bad time, he got beat up in Egypt, well, he would be coming back through. It's like, oh, there's Israel. I can beat up them, because they were never a very big kingdom. But as long as they were following God, God protected them. But it got to a point where they were just kind of like, you're just kind of, you're on my way to here. And so I'll just stop by and I'll beat you up. And that's what's happening here, is that they have these neighbors who are bigger and more powerful, and God allows these neighboring kingdoms to punish them because they started worshiping like these neighboring kingdoms. You would think if I'm acting like my neighbor and then my neighbor turns on me, maybe I wouldn't act like my neighbor. But we see this pattern repeat over and over. And verse 16 says, then the Lord raised up judges who delivered them from the hands of those who plundered them. So this is a pattern that is set up for the book of Judges. And Israel would follow God as long as a particular judge lived, and then it was back to worshiping other idols. And this pattern repeated for 400 years through a series of 12 judges. Now we're going to get down to Judges. Go ahead.
And
Yes.
with that is, although they weren't taught, and if we're not taught by our parents, we're still responsible when we get wrong.
Yeah, because they had the
Because
word.
God was mad at them for it.
Mhm.
The phrase that the Lord's finger was hot against Israel is used so many times in
Yeah.
Judges.
And people who say that, God is love, there's a Christian song out right now. It's a beautiful song. There's only love in the heart of God. There is love in the heart of God, but that's not the only thing. God doesn't feel one emotion. There's not one dimension to God.
Just because my parents punished me did not mean they didn't.
Right,
love me.
right. In fact, if parents don't
That's
correct,
exactly why.
yes.
Should love.
Right.
yes, that, and again, that's God is doing this to get their attention, because what
Because he loves
happens, right? What happens after they've been punished for a while, after these different armies, they call out to God. It sometimes takes them a while. It sometimes takes them 20 years. I think at one point it took them 40 years. And I'm kind of scratching my head. It's kind of like 40 years of this before you say, hey, God, by the way, could you give us a hand here? Yeah. So that kind of, but anyway, so this repeats. Gideon is actually the fifth judge. So now what I want to do is look at Gideon's response to fear, and then look at an application to that. So let's go ahead and read Judges chapter 5, verse 31 through chapter 6, verse 4.
Thus let all your enemies perish, O Lord, but let those who love him be like the sun when it comes out in full strength. So the land had rest for 40 years. Then the children of Israel did evil in the sight of the Lord. So the Lord delivered them into the hand of Midian 7 years. And the hand of Midian prevailed against Israel. Because of the Midianites, the children of Israel made for themselves the dens, the caves, and the strongholds which are in the mountains. So it was, whenever Israel had sown, Midianites would come up. Also Amalekites and the people of the east would come up against them. Then they would encamp against them and destroy the produce of the earth as far as Gaza, and leave no sustenance for Israel, neither sheep nor ox nor donkey.
Thank you. All right. So again, Israel's prosperous. They get complacent, and then they forget God. It seems that, and I really don't like this, but we kind of see it in our own country too, that the more comfortable you get, there's a reason it says soldiers of Christ arise, because when we're sitting, we get a little too comfortable, a little too, complacent. And that's what happened. They get prosperous. They're doing well. They have peace because God gave them peace. But in chapter 5 it says they had peace for 40 years, undisturbed. I like that word, undisturbed by all that's going on around you for 40 years. But then they did what was evil in the sight of the Lord. And what they were doing was, once again, oh, these guys are worshiping this way. That looks fun and different and, whatever. But it led them to sin. But we see the patience of God over and over through this. I mean, this pattern kept happening. And God had warned them through Moses, if you obey me, this is what you get. If you don't obey me, this is what you get. And it's just, you can go through that list of those warnings, and some of them are pretty serious warnings, to kind of get their attention. But those things come to pass but God had told them this, and we see the patience of God. I think it was Malachi that says, God does not change, therefore you are not destroyed. Because again, God promised, if you repent, then I will turn back to you.
There are some says he changes, not all of those, that's all.
I think so, yeah. I can't remember the rest. Yeah. But again, that's the whole idea with Malachi, is that, God doesn't change, therefore we are not destroyed. And he's speaking specifically to Israel, but yeah. But again, because God made these promises, they are not destroyed.
In our own country, it was founded on the Christian principles, although they
Yeah.
did not follow the Bible explicitly.
Right.
There was the restoration, and it worked out very well for all these years, and now.
Kind of getting away from that. But again, God does not allow sin to go unpunished, and he's allowing Midian to rob Israel, so there's just nothing left. Let's go ahead and read verses 6 to 10, please.
So Israel was greatly impoverished because the Midianites and the children of Israel cried out to the Lord. And it came to pass, when the children of Israel cried out to the Lord because of the Midianites, that the Lord sent a prophet to the children of Israel, who said to them, Thus says the Lord God of Israel, I brought you up from Egypt and brought you out of the house of bondage. And I delivered you out of the hand of the Egyptians and out of the hand of all who oppressed you, and drove them out before you, and gave your land, and gave you their lands. Also I say to you, I am the Lord your God. Do not fear the gods of the Amorites, in whose land you dwell, but you have not obeyed my voice.
Thank you. All right. So the people of Israel, they are scared. They're hiding in caves. I mean, that's, pretty scary times. After 7 years, they call out to God. That's a long time. I'm not going to say anything else, because I know people who have left God and it's been decades. And I'm kind of like, your life isn't any better now, but
Worse.
yeah.
Sometimes it's at the end of their life when they realize they haven't got any more time.
Sometimes, and I hope, I don't think God cares when, because we have the parable that says, the workers who start in the morning get paid, the workers who start in the evening get paid. It's like, I don't care when, I just, I just care that people turn back to God. But again, the people of Israel, they're scared, they're hiding, and then they call out to God finally. In verse 6, depending on your translation, Israel has been brought low, they've been impoverished, they are very weak, they are very poor. And so God sent a prophet. Now, God didn't just say, okay, I'm going to take care of the Midianites. First, he says, okay, you've got to listen. And he sent a prophet to remind Israel of his love and power, and to remind them the real problem wasn't Midian. The real problem was Israel's disobedience. Midian just happened to be what God was using at that particular time to punish Israel for their disobedience. Okay. All right, verse 11 to 16, please.
Now the angel of the Lord came and sat under the oak at Ophrah, which belonged to Joash and of Bezerah, as his son Gideon was beating out wheat in the winepress to hide it from the Midianites. And the angel of the Lord appeared to him and said to him, The Lord is with you, you mighty man of valor. And Gideon said to him, Pray, sir, if the Lord is with us, why then has all this befallen us? And where are all his wonderful deeds which our fathers recounted to us, saying, Did not the Lord bring us up from Egypt? But now the Lord has cast us off and given us to the hand of Midian. And the Lord turned to him and said, Go in this might of yours, and deliver Israel from the hand of Midian. Do not I send you? But he said to him, Pray, Lord, how can I deliver Israel? Behold, my clan is the weakest in the Manasseh, and I am the least in my family. And the Lord said to him, But I will be with you, and you shall smite the Gideonites as one man.
Thank you. All right. Israel is an agrarian society. They grow their food. I know for a fact that if we had to depend on my garden, we would starve just because I'm not that good at it. I'm still learning. But again, this is, yeah, it was a rough summer for
All
that.
they see is that the Lord had forsaken them.
Yes.
Didn't realize that maybe because
They-
own behavior.
They had already forsaken God. It's kind of, God doesn't leave us first. But again, wheat was threshed in open spaces, maybe on a hilltop, because the whole idea was you kind of beat it out and then you kind of throw it up in the air and the chaff is blown away and the wheat falls to the ground. And then you have the good stuff that you can make bread from that you can eat. Now Gideon was doing it all wrong. This is not the way you do
Why
wheat,
did you do it in a wine press?
because he's hiding from the Midianites. Because if he's doing it out in the open, some Midianite is going to see him, they're going to come along and they're going to take it. And then he's not going to be able to take any kind of food home to his family. So he's hiding out, doing it the most inefficient way possible, because he wants to have something to eat for his family to eat.
Is the wine press closed?
Yeah, it's kind of like it's my understanding was that, you thresh out the wheat on kind of a hilltop, because, you're looking for the breeze. In a wine press, you don't want that. You want a cool, darker place.
Seems like
Not-
they've been really bad for asthma.
Yeah, because when you do thresh wheat, you do.
Yeah.
You toss it around, yeah.
Yeah.
And that's why you're outside in the open with a breeze, because you don't want, I'm sure they would figure out, okay, where do I need to stand so it doesn't get in my face?
Everything there because of.
Uh-huh. Right. So it's a totally different thing, and, completely, completely ineffective, or, it's just not the way to do it. And yet that's his only choice, is to hide it so that the Midianites just don't, because that's what they were doing. Apparently it was just so, so common for the Midianites to just come along and take anything that they saw that they wanted, that Israel had, any kind of food, anything at all. So this is the desperation here that he's doing this. Now it's clear when he's speaking to God here that when chapter 2, when it says that they forgot about God, doesn't mean that they have no information, doesn't mean that they've never heard any of these stories, but they forgot and worshiped and refused to worship him. They made a choice. And we'll see through the history of Israel that somehow they think they can do both. They can worship God and they can do what their neighbors do and worship like their neighbors do at the same time. It's kind of, well, I don't want to, okay, I'll say it. I'm here on Sunday. Why can't I do what I want on Monday? I think I heard a country song one time of, what they were doing on Saturday night, but they were in church on Sunday.
They were at the bar on Saturday night.
Yeah. And I'm kind of like, okay, but again, the way the writer of Judges puts that is they forgot God. Okay. If you don't put God first, if you're not obeying God in everything that you do, that is the same thing as just completely forgetting
Monday
all
through
about
Friday,
God.
Saturday, you have to do it.
Yeah, if you forget about him from Monday to Saturday and show up on Sunday, you have forgotten God. It's the same thing. So it's interesting that Gideon knows the stories, but his father still has an idol that they worship at. Okay, so it's not, he had never heard of the stories. It was, I'm gonna try to do both things, and that doesn't work. That was just an extra bonus. Verse 12, the angel of the Lord appears to Gideon and claims, the Lord is with you. And what's Gideon's response?
Kind of like, what is all this happening? Nothing.
It's kind of like, well,
How can I do this?
yeah, well, his first response when the angel of the Lord says, the Lord is with you, he says, says, what do you mean he's with me? All these bad things happen. Verse 13, he says, if the Lord is with us, why then has all this happened to us? Anybody ever heard anybody say that or think that? I've done both. I've heard people say it and I've thought it and I've come real close to saying it. It's kind of like, why are these bad things happening? I mean, if God, God is supposed to be with us, he protects us, all these things. Why do these bad things happen? There's a whole book. I don't remember when it came out, but why bad things happen to good people. So Gideon goes on, where are all his miracles, which our fathers told us about, saying, did the Lord not bring us up from Egypt? But now the Lord has abandoned us and handed us over to Midian. Had God abandoned Israel? No. What was actually happening? Yeah, they had abandoned him. What was actually,
God didn't.
they moved. They were being punished. Punished is different than abandoned. Okay. If you have kids and you abandon them, that is completely different than if you have kids and you punish them and their feelings kind of go, they don't love me. They punish me. Yeah, Kids will respond that way. You know, you punish me, you don't let, all this, nah. It is the opposite.
God punishes us.
Yes. But again, God never abandoned them, but he did punish them. And he did withdraw his protection from them, because itty bitty Israel, surrounded by things like Assyria and later on Babylon, and Syria, I mean, all of these big kingdoms, they had to have God's protection just to exist. And again, we also have this prophet from God. Now, he didn't come and just give his message in one spot and say, okay, time's up. I've done my 20-minute sermon. No, he's going around all of Israel preaching. And if you're in an agrarian society and you don't hear a lot of news because you don't have the internet, what the news you get is what's brought to your area. And so somebody, a stranger comes to town, everybody's going to gather around and listen to the message. So this prophet from God has been traveling around reminding Israel of God's love and power. But if you don't feel it, but Gideon and indeed all of Israel, they're worried about having enough food to eat. They don't feel God's power. They don't feel God's love. They have to hide from their enemies, and they feel frightened and abandoned. And that brings us to our first point. Fear tempts us to doubt God's love and power, because right in the middle of being afraid, I feel alone. I feel like there's no help because I am afraid. And that's what fear does to us. Fear causes responses. When Gideon is reminded that God loves and cares for his people, his response is one of doubt. If the Lord is with us, why have all these things happened? That is not a new response. That's not the first time that was said. It's not the last time. I mean, it's a very easy thing to do, to take that fear and doubt. It's kind of like, well, maybe, is God not, is there something going on that God's not, because we have God's 100% attention. And that's the amazing thing, to know that anytime that I approach God, that I have 100% of his attention.
Yeah.
But yes, go ahead.
How do we know when God's punishing us?
Somebody else has done wrong to us that caused the problem, or it's just life?
That is a very good question. And I think
All of the above.
How do we know?
Because he says he does punish you.
Yeah.
Right.
we're jumping into application, but that's an excellent
I
question.
realize it's
Yeah.
off the subject, but my
But
mind.
it's not real. No, it's a very important question. I think we need to examine ourselves.
Well, I don't
I
think
mean,
it matters.
well-
If you love God, you're striving to live for him. You
Well,
don't
if God
trust
is
him.
punishing me, then I need to correct
Yes.
myself.
But again,
Well,
James
you
tells
call-
us, yeah,
Well,
You self-examine
then
yourself.
you need
Yeah.
to correct.
First.
right.
But if it's just life out in the world that's happened, because things happen, but how do we know?
Well, I think James tells us that, when we look at them, that some people are like, they look in a mirror and they forget what they look like. Okay. We have the word of God. We can know whether or not we're obeying God. Okay. God doesn't keep secrets from us like that. God is not a gotcha kind of God. Okay. We can know absolutely if I
But
am,
these people act like they don't know what they did.
they knew what they did.
Well, they act
Because-
like
because-
from the comment.
And again, because God has sent a messenger to them saying, God, that they have disobeyed God, that they have forgotten God. So they
But before
know.
he got there, they were thinking these same things.
Sure.
God has abandoned me, and what have I done?
But they are ignoring the law of Moses. They are ignoring what they know. And they're ignoring the law. They're ignoring what they know
Or
and
it's
making
ignorant.
excuses.
Well,
could
God
be,
doesn't abandon
but-
us.
right.
We abandon him.
But that still doesn't answer my question.
Yeah.
Where we go, it says.
Well, I just hold to his faith.
Exactly.
Didn't obey, the prophets told.
Right. Because
A little
again,
farther down from where she was reading.
it's been 20 years since Deborah was judge, and Deborah was telling them from God, this is right, this is wrong, and she was applying the law of Moses, and so it had been, and they had had peace for 40 years. They're not going to forget that, and so it's been only 7 years, so after that 40 years, when they know whether they or not they could read, they're being told, okay, you two have this argument, you're right, you're wrong, you straighten up, make it right, and go on. So they had that. God provided that leadership. Okay. He never just said, okay, people of Israel, you go out and you just kind of make your best guesses. He never did that. What he did was he had Moses lead them, and Moses judged them. And then Moses' father-in-law says there's too many of them, divide up the workload, okay, of godly people who will apply God's message and tell the people God's message. So they never had an excuse, and God was constantly sending them prophets, sending them judges, sending them all these messages saying, this is right, this is wrong, straighten up. Okay, so they never had an excuse. There was never a question of, oh, I wonder what I should do. That's, I have these two choices. I wonder which one is right. Should I bash this person in the head, or should I help this person pull their donkey out of a ditch? They never had a question as to which was right and which was wrong, because God constantly told them which it was. Okay, and I think the same thing with us. We have this, I carry it around in my pocket. I can constantly look at this, and it's kind of, if I'm bad mouthing Gilda behind her back, sorry, we can't do that today. But if I'm bad mouthing Gilda behind her back, it's wrong. And I can look, I can see that, and I can know that. There's no question, there's no doubt. God is not a gotcha God. Okay, we can know. And if something, if I'm going along and I am pretending to myself, like James says that we can, if I'm pretending to myself, well, I'm just holding on to this one little sin. I just want to be able to slam a kitchen cabinet when I'm upset. And I just want to bounce it off its hinges. And I don't care that my kids are watching me or my husband's kind of, whoa, what's happening? I just want to be able to slam that kitchen. But I can know where anger leads. I can know what kind of example I am being. I can know what I'm doing to relationships. There's no doubt about it. Okay. And again, we can fool ourselves. James says that, we can look in a mirror and walk away like I never saw anything bad. But we have that opportunity to see that mirror. We can pretend to ourselves that we're not doing anything, but God holds up that mirror to us. We have his word that holds the mirror up to our lives and says, okay, this is right, this is wrong. We choose to ignore it.
We have to examine ourselves every day.
We have had,
look at ourselves and be honest.
Yes, we have all had people do us wrong. None of us are young enough that hasn't happened. Okay. And so we can know they did me dirty, and it has a lasting effect. It hurts. Okay. It affects us. It doesn't have to control us. And then of course there's just life, and things go wrong and things happen, and we get sick, our bodies wear out, because there is sin and death in this world.
Boy, do they ever.
Yeah.
It was in chapter 2, verse 17. The people, yet they would not listen to their voice.
Would not.
But
Yes.
They slaved the harlot with other gods without him.
Yes.
They turned quick from
Yeah.
the way in which their fathers walked, and obeying the commandments of the Lord, they did not do so.
Thank you, Anita. Again, that choice of would not. Yes.
And in the very simplest form, we all have a conscience,
Mhm.
and God gave us a conscience.
Oh, yeah. Yes.
And even if you're in a situation where your family and your community has been away from
Mhm.
God and his, for a long time, you still have that conscience.
Yes.
So I think kind of always know that that's wrong. And if you choose to do it anyway,
Yeah.
thinking, well, I don't really know if it's wrong, it's wrong.
Yeah.
Well, not necessarily if you haven't been trained. Because a lot of people have seared consciences. And
But
they
that
think
takes
what they're
time.
doing is okay.
But I think
That
you're talking
takes
about
time.
people that were raised
Right.
correctly,
Were
that
raised
is
and
right.
know
But again,
And
when
then
you
they
start
choose
off,
to-
I think it takes time to get that point of seared conscience, that is not an instant thing.
No,
Right.
not if you,
So,
not if you know the Lord.
so very good question. Yeah. Hopefully we answered that sort of, but it's a tough question.
Yeah.
It's a very good question. All right, let's go on with verse 14. the angel of the Lord agrees with Gideon that something has to be done about these Midianites. This is a bad situation. Something has to be done. And guess what, Gideon? You're the guy. Oh, and
We none of us want to hear that.
right. And how does Gideon respond?
I'm weak.
Not me. I can't. Okay. Same way that Moses responded. Uh-huh. I'm just the baby of the family. I've got older brothers. They can do this. All right. But again, that brings us to our second point. Fear creates self-doubt when God says go and do. When we see opportunity. And I got to say, the first time when I see opportunity, my first response is, no, I can't. Well, there's this opportunity. No, I can't. Yeah, it's kind of like I've told y'all before, it's kind of, when I was asked to teach a ladies class, I was kind of like, okay, fine, I'll do one. I don't, I teach kids classes. I don't teach ladies classes. Well, do one, just do one. Fine. I did one. Okay. You're not teaching the kids class anymore. You're teaching the ladies class. It's kind of like, nuh-uh. And again, because it's scary and teaching is scary. The first time I was teaching was just, as a 23-year-old, it's scary. I was outnumbered. Okay. But again, doing these, and that was my response. It's still my response. I told Sam last week, I kind of shared this with y'all. I can't do it this week. And it's just kind of like, because again, that fear of failure, fear of, all kinds of things, y'all are just mean. No, you're not. It's kind of, this is all internal. Okay. Right. Don't throw any shoes. All right. But fear, that's the second point though, that fear creates self-doubt. Gideon recognized Israel's need for a leader, someone to fight for them. Someone has to do something about this. Not me. Okay. When the angel of the Lord said, yeah, you're the guy. Not me. I'm scared. I can't. And fear did that to Gideon. So the rest of Judges chapter 6, we see God showed Gideon several signs to prove that what he had heard was from God. And he has Gideon gather Israel to fight. And then we know that what happened then was that there was a whole bunch there. And God says, you need like 300 people, 300 guys against the entire.
Reader's Digest condensed version.
We have studied Gideon, so we're not going to go into detail on Gideon because we're studying fear today. But yes, but again, so he has 300 people, 300 guys against the vast army of Midian. Midian had like 3,000 camels. I mean, so it's kind of like they are incredibly outnumbered. And let's turn to Judges chapter 7, actually. And I want us to see the mercy and kindness of God, because Gideon is still scared. Okay. He's still afraid. And in chapter 7, verse 9, now on the same night it came about that the Lord said to him, arise, go down against the camp, for I have given it into your hands. But if you are afraid to go down, go with Purah your servant down to the camp, and you will hear what they say. And afterward, your hands will be strengthened that you may go down against the camp. Said, okay, Gideon is still afraid. I mean, just because the angel of the Lord called him a mighty man of valor didn't make it so. I mean, Gideon doesn't feel this yet. He has 300 guys, vastly outnumbered. And so God says, hey, if you're still scared, go down. I want you to hear something. And he goes down and he overhears a conversation about a dream that one of the Midianites had. And then he hears the interpretation of it in verse 14. And his friend answered and said, this is nothing less than the sword of Gideon, the son of Joash, a man of Israel. God has given Midian and all the camp into his hand. He hears his enemy saying that, is interpreting the dream that his buddy had. In verse 15, and it came about when Gideon heard the account of the dream and its interpretation that he bowed in worship. He returned to the camp of Israel and said, arise, for the Lord has given the camp of Midian into your hands. Here we see the turning point. He is scared up until this time, okay? He's scared up until now. And God has been showing him different things. And I think we've studied Gideon before, but so he shows him different miracles to say, I'm with you, I'm with you. And finally he hears it from the mouth of his enemy. And he says, okay, God's with me. And he worships. He's in the middle of the camp, the Midian camp, and he stops to pray to God. I'd still been hightailing it out of there real fast, but he's no longer afraid. And he says, I don't have to be afraid. I can stop and worship right now.
But he had 300 people that weren't afraid.
Oh, yeah. And he had to have those 300 guys too. All right. But again, that brings us to our third point in verse 15 here, that faith assures us that God is always with us. It took him a while to get there, but he got there and he knew that God was with him. And then we know that God gave Gideon the victory over Israel's enemies. Okay, now I want to bring it forward. Israel needed help. Their world was a scary, dangerous place. The world hasn't changed. The world has always been the same. It's always been, because there is sin in the world, it has always been a scary, dangerous place. It does kind of feel like it's getting more so, doesn't it? Because it feels like, because we're living right in the middle of it. I'm sure my mom's generation with the Vietnam War and all the chaos that was going on then, they felt, that she probably felt, well, it can't get any worse than this. But, and again, we're in a spot where we can just know everything that's going on everywhere.
You're bombarded with all that.
It's way too much. 24-hour news cycles. Yeah, it's just insane. When for 24 hours, you're hearing the same negative things over and over.
When we look back, like into our mother's generation, how in the world did they do this? But they survived. They fought
Yes.
the Depression. We don't know anything about the Depression. And
Right.
what we know about it, but we don't
Right.
understand why they were so frustrated, because they it all
My mother
came
said
out.
they didn't know they were poor because everybody around them were just.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, with my grandparents, his cousins lived in, they were one of those who moved to California because they had nothing, because they were so poor and so desperate that they got up and moved away from family, which you just didn't do at the time. But just a couple of headlines that are very recent. 100 children, these are children in the New York school system, have identified as Generation X. Whatever that means, but you've got 100 children in the New York school systems who have identified that way. We have a Supreme Court justice who cannot identify what a woman is because, and these were her words, she's not a biologist. What?
She has eyes to see.
I'm just saying, I was hearing Monday, a liberal newspaper editor in Seattle, liberal newspaper guy, Democrat, dyed-in-the-wool liberal guy working on a newspaper in Seattle, of all places. He just got fired from his job as the newspaper editor because he questioned why there was still a 16-foot tall statue of Lenin on a prominent street corner when a veterans memorial in a private cemetery had been torn down. He was just asking questions. It's kind of, is this really, we've done this? Is this really what needs? He just asked questions and he was fired. The world is a crazy place. This world has lost all reason. Society seems to be coming apart at an alarmingly rapid pace. And the world is just getting scarier every day. And I don't know that the world is actually any different than it's been through generations. I mean, because, look at the time here when Midian was taking away the food out of your mouth. It's kind of, okay, I need to beat this out and this wheat out to have bread to eat tonight, and somebody would come along and just take it out of your hands. That's a scary different. Yeah,
I always think of Sodom and Gomorrah.
yeah.
Humans are
Each
humans.
generation, humans are the same, yes, and each generation deals with scary, dangerous world.
I never thought we'd have to deal with wondering what sex we are.
Right,
I
crazy,
didn't know
but
it was
again,
questioned.
I know that.
it is. But fear,
Why
Yeah.
would it be?
I know. It doesn't. Yeah, it doesn't make sense. But then
But the world was
The world
so
doesn't.
evil, God destroyed it was.
that is true.
That's
That is,
true.
and he
So we know
and
it's
he will
right.
again. He will again.
Everybody but 8 people.
Right.
Yeah.
All their thoughts were evil continually. That is amazing. I don't think we're at that point. And that's the amazing thing, that the world was worse at the time of Noah, because if you're, only evil continually. And it's kind of, that is, I mean, there's some really messed up people, but I live in a nice neighborhood. The thoughts there, yeah, there, well, except for that guy, but again, the vast majority of my neighbors, not Christians, but nice people. Their thoughts are not evil continually. They're not constantly trying to figure out how they can hurt me. They're actually kind of helpful, kind of nice. Wave to them in the morning when we're walking. But again, fear would tempt us to doubt God's love and power. Why does God allow bad things to happen to good people? Why did God allow bad things to happen that still have an effect on us individually? Okay. because it's kind of like, okay, oh, you can say, well, it made me stronger. No, it didn't. It hurt. It still hurts. Okay. Why does God allow these bad things to happen? Why hasn't God done something to stop the corruption, the hate, the evil, just the plain idiocy in our society?
Because he wants everybody to be saved.
Yeah, he does.
That's right.
But
Well,
fear would tempt us to doubt and ask, as Gideon did, if God is with us, why are all these bad things happening? Where's the power of God that I read about? I read about his power. Why isn't he doing anything? Why isn't he making things right now? Why isn't he making things right the way I think they should be? Oops. That's a little, that one's a little too far, but where's the power of God I read about in the Bible? I mean, that's a reasonable question. Has God abandoned us to the evil in this world? And that's the temptation of fear. The temptation of fear is to focus our attention on circumstances, to get us watching that 24-hour news cycle that is just going to make my head explode. Because these are things I can't control. Okay. I can't control what happens in Washington, D.C. I mean, I can vote, but that's the limit of my control. Yeah.
I asked Britt, do you want supper? Turn it to a channel, because I'm not.
I
gonna stay
know.
in this kitchen and listen. to
I
that.
know.
can't do it. I'll be throwing a pot at you or something.
But that's a temptation of fear, is to say, look at all these circumstances you can't control and get worked up about them.
But then we're
And get
talking about
focused
put
on
our
it.
head in
That's true. But the things that I can't control, I've got to give to
Let it
God.
go.
God, and I've got to trust God is going to take care of it. He will make things right.
See, Donna, she can listen to it and she controls
Yeah,
herself.
I
but
can't.
I
Okay.
can't.
I watch the news for just a few minutes and I'm getting myself spun up. Oh yeah, I'm so getting spun up, and it exhausts my energy. Anybody else do this? You just watch a little bit of the bad, knowing you can't do anything about it. It exhausts your energy
Yeah.
and it takes away joy and peace. I
It's when
can't watch it like that.
creativity to want to do something else.
Yes.
Because I get depressed.
But again, those things that I can't control, fear would say, worry about those things, focus on those things. And it's kind of, well, I can't do anything about them. Yeah, great. Focus on them so you feel really bad about it. Okay, focus on them so you wonder, where is God in all this? That is what fear does to us.
I fought fear as a child, because who in the world in their right mind thought a kid was gonna be saved under his desk from an atomic bomb? And that's what they taught us.
And my daddy built
I went
a
into the
ball
hallway.
shelter.
I remember those drills.
Yeah.
I wouldn't have got in that thing, there was spiders and all kinds of stuff.
You
But
could've got
again,
me in it.
But again, that's what fear does to us. Fear causes action, and fear
Right.
causes us to turn away, to look away from God and focus on circumstances. Fear creates self-doubt. When God says, go and do, fear says, I can't. I have spent my life saying I can't. And that's wrong, because God has put me in situations where I am thinking I can't. And lo and behold, months and years go by. It's kind of like, oh, well, I am.
did it, I'm doing it.
Yeah. It's kind of, but I still come back to that,
My problem is
Like
I
they
say, oh, I can do it.
yeah.
I've
I've heard recently from someone that Christian women can't do anything. There's just nothing for them to do.
Oh, my goodness.
There's nothing. Someone told me, and it's not the first time I've heard this, that, well, there's just nothing for Christian women to do.
Oh, because we don't go party.
No, because
Yeah, we
there's
don't
nothing,
come
there's no good work for us to do. There's,
Yeah.
Right.
We don't preach or lead.
Yeah.
or-
so there's nothing for Christian women to do. And to me, to me, that is a self-doubting, I can't statement. You've already decided. And so it's kind of like, well, I'm just going to be stuck here. And sometimes I think maybe Christians are looking for the big things that we can do. Well, it's kind of like, well, if I can't do this, then I can't do anything.
Yeah.
If I can't be a Gideon, then I can't be, then I can't be anything. Well, there was only one Gideon. He had 300 guys with him helping him. Well, what were they doing? They were carrying clay pots with a torch in them, and then they were yelling. Okay, that was their job. When you think about it, now they did get down into the fight, but that was their job, because God took care of the battle. Their job was to carry a clay pitcher with a torch in it, and then at the right moment, hold up the torch and yell.
With
That was their job.
Don't forget.
Oh, yeah, with the trumpet, but that was their job, okay? And then God is the one who is defeating the Midianite army, okay? So, but there was only one Gideon. You had to have the people who were with him, because Gideon was not able to stand by himself. Although God would have done it that way, he could have done it that way, but Gideon wasn't able. He needed that. All right, I've got to speed up here. But again, Ephesians 2 verse 10 says, "For we are his workmanship, created in Christ Jesus for good works." Not some of us, not a couple of us, not just the men in the congregation. We are created for good works. Am I going to focus my attention on circumstances I can't change, or am I going to use my energy to help those around me? It's like, fine, I can't change the world, but I can help someone sitting right beside me. I can find out what's going on with them and I can help them out. I can listen, or I can be patient. When I don't feel like being patient, like this morning. And I'm going to details. 1 Thessalonians 5 verse 11, "Therefore encourage one another and build one another up." We don't have to conquer the world. We don't have to make everything right. That is God's job. Don't try to take on his job, which I tried to do. Encourage one another. Everybody needs encouragement. Our leaders need encouragement. The preacher needs encouragement. Each one of the guys out there trying to do something, the young men who get up and try to lead a song need encouragement. The women who are teaching the kids classes need encouragement. The moms need encouragement. We can all, that is something we can all do.
The lady who teaches Wednesday's class.
The lady who desperately needs encouragement. Okay. My mom got to the point in her life where, you know, I was doing cards for her, and she would tell me, okay, I need this stamp in there, because what she felt like doing was signing her name and addressing the card. That's all she felt like doing. But she did that. And she did that all the time. I mean, I had people who would send me pictures of cards that she had sent them after she had died. And that was all that she, you know, but she kept encouraging, even when she didn't feel like doing anything
That's
else.
like Miss Angie Brown's mom, Miss Virginia.
Yeah.
She was sick with cancer, but she would go visit when she was able, but it got down to the point
Right.
she could make a phone call, and that was about as much as she could do.
Yeah.
Or
Brother
she
Bobby.
continued to
Right.
do something.
Brother Bobby used to call and check on us.
Yeah.
He's got a cell phone now.
I
maybe
know,
doing it.
I know.
All right. Sorry, I have to rush this a little bit. Galatians 6 verse 10. "So then, while we have opportunity, let's do good to all people, and especially those who are of the household of faith." Rod gets up whenever he's doing announcements. It's kind of like, okay, we've got people who haven't been here for a while. We have people who are not, basically, it's kind of like not attending like they should. Let's encourage them. Just send a card. Okay. That doesn't take a whole lot. Okay. So, but it makes a big difference. Like I said, when my mom died, I had people telling me, she sent me cards. Here's a picture of me. You know, they took pictures of themselves holding the cards that my mom had sent them, so they could show me. And that's, you know, and you would think but that was a big deal to them.
It's special to get mail.
Yes. And that brings us to our, I do want to, I've got to get on my soapbox for just a second here. I want us to see how God dealt with fear and the pattern, and that we can use the same pattern. In Judges chapter 6, verse 7, first, we have to humble ourselves and be willing to turn to God. Can't have an I've got this attitude. I mean, because my first thought when something's bothering me, it's kind of like, okay, how do I power through this? No, first thought, humble myself. God, I don't know how I can do this. First thought, humble and turn to God. That's verse 7 of chapter 6. Verse 8, a willingness to turn to God's word. The prophet was going around preaching. People had to choose whether or not they were going to listen to him and listen to God's word. Verse 10, if needed, we must be willing to repent and straighten out our lives, if that's needed. If it's other things, then it's other things. And sometimes we don't have control over those things. That's a harder thing to accept, because if I can do something there, then that, you know, that feels better. Things I can't control are harder, but sometimes I have to let go and say, okay, God will make things right. And then verse 14, where we see Gideon, we need to look outside ourselves and find opportunities to help others, because I'm convinced that focusing on someone else helps take the focus off my own fears, my own hurts, my own whatever, if I'm focusing on someone else. That was an extra soapbox right there. Y'all just get that as a freebie. Let's get to our third point. Our third point, faith assures us that God is always with us. We can be just as certain as Gideon that God is with us. One of the names of Jesus is Emmanuel, which means God with us. Okay, Matthew 1, chapter 23. Matthew 29, verse 20, Jesus makes a promise. I am with you. Does he say some of the times? When you feel like I'm there? No, he says always, to the end of the age. Hebrews 13, starting in verse 5, says, he himself has said, I will never desert you, nor will I ever abandon you, so that we confidently say, the Lord is my helper. I will not be afraid. What will man do to me? Remember those who led you, who spoke the word of God to you, and considering the result of their way of life, imitate their faith. Okay, that's Hebrews chapter 13, verses 5-7. God is always with us. We have that promise all through the New Testament, and we can know from seeing his promises fulfilled all through the Old Testament that he keeps every single promise. All right, any other comments before we finish up here? Okay, remember, fear causes action. What are we going to do when we feel fears? Are we going to, turtle up and say, okay, I've got to figure this out somehow? Are we going to, where is God? Woe is me. What are we going to do here when we feel fear? One choice is to doubt God's love and power. That is a choice. And I know Christians who have stopped following God because of their hurts, because bad things happen, because they couldn't handle the fear in their life, and God's not here. And their response was basically, if the Lord is with us, why has this happened? And they walked away from God, and they made that choice. Doubting God's love and power leads straight to an I can't attitude. Because if God doesn't have power, I sure don't. Okay. And it just leads directly to that I can't attitude. And sometimes a response of I can't believe in God anymore. I have heard that. And it's heartbreaking when you hear that, when you know there's no other hope out there. There's nothing else out there. But that doubting God's power and God's love leads to I can't, and it can lead to I can't believe in God. And even if we don't walk away from God outright, we kind of start pulling back. And I've seen that too. Well, maybe I just won't come on Wednesdays anymore. Well, now I won't come on Sunday nights. It's like, well, I'll check off the box on Sunday for worship. And that pulling back because I'm
Just
hurt.
So I don't get a call.
Right. Right.
So broad.
And people saying, I can't keep trying because I'm just hurting too much. And so I just can't. And those people slowly fade away. So it can be an abrupt thing, which I've seen that, an abrupt, I can't believe in God anymore, or just a very slow fade away of, it's the same thing. That fear, those hurts, those doubts, breaking relationship with God. That's one choice. There's only one other choice. And the other choice is to hold on the faith that assures us that God is always with us. But if we make that choice, we have to understand we have work to do. If there's no other comments, I want to finish with Joshua chapter 1, verse 9. God has told Joshua, you have work to do. You have a lifelong work to do, and it's going to be hard because you're going to try to be herding cats for the rest of your life. Israel was like herding cats. Moses said more than once, it's kind of like, kill me now. I don't want to deal with these people anymore. Okay. But again, and so now Joshua is in that position. And in chapter 1, verse 9, God tells him, have I not commanded you? Be strong and courageous. Do not be terrified nor dismayed, for the Lord your God is with you wherever you go. Thank you so much for your time and for your comments.